It is honestly hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that the Nintendo Switch has been out for 4 years at this point. But somehow that actually is the case. And it is high time for a successor to the Nintendo Switch. Obviously, we've gotten the Switch Lite, which is just sort of a handheld only version of the Switch where the Joy-Cons don't come off. But it's time now to get a Switch that actually has more horsepower, more raw power to compete against the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. Because the reality is that when the Nintendo Switch launched in 2017, it was already underpowered when compared to the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox, whatever it was that they were calling it back then. And that is due to the fact that the Nintendo Switch is running on an NVIDIA mobile chipset, a Tegra X chip. And while that chipset is powerful enough to do some pretty impressive things, it didn't compare to the PlayStation at the time, and it certainly does not compare to the PlayStation now. And that brings us to today, where we have a report coming from Bloomberg, which I'm not going to show you because it's behind a paywall, and I don't want to get in trouble for showing it to you. So I'm just going to talk about like what's in that article. What we have here is a report that a Pro version of the Nintendo Switch, or as I'm going to call it in this video, a Super Nintendo Switch, because come on, just do it already, Nintendo, is apparently coming very soon. As you guys may or may not know, E3 is right around the corner in early June. It is now late May, and there are rumors, and in fact this new Nintendo Switch may be announced even before E3 to get sort of out in front of that event, so that whole event can be spent on really deep diving into the hardware and then showing off games that are going to take advantage of that new hardware. So what is the new hardware? What's different about this Super Nintendo Switch? Well, the first thing is that it's rumored to be running a 7-inch OLED panel supplied by Samsung. Now, of course, that is a larger display than what was on the old Nintendo Switch, which is a 6.2-inch LCD. So not only are you going to get those richer colors, the blacker blacks, and all the great things about OLED, you're going to get a bigger display. And I don't think the actual form factor is going to change much. I'm hoping that massive bezel around the old Switch is just going to evaporate, and then that will just give you room for a much larger screen in a similar footprint. I tend to think that display is going to stay at 720p, and the biggest reasons are pretty obvious to me. 720p versus 1080p on a 7-inch screen, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. But on a 720p display, guess what? You're going to have higher frame rate and better battery life, and those are things we all enjoy. But there's got to be something more about this for this Super Nintendo Switch, which will have apparently its first shipments being sent out as early as July, and they ramp up as we approach the end of summer, headed towards that holiday season, getting closer to October. So what are those bigger hardware changes? Well, it's a more advanced, faster NVIDIA, likely Tegra variant on the inside that makes all the difference. So while this thing's going to run 720p in handheld mode, the rumor is it will output at 4K when it is docked. And I need to stake a flag in the ground here and get this out of the way now. It will not be rendering at 4K, period. Isn't possible. The PlayStation 4 Pro could not render at 4K. It used a checkerboard style, fake it till you make it implementation of 4K. And it wasn't until the PlayStation 5 that we got true 4K being rendered on a home console. So no, a mobile chipset in a Nintendo handheld like the Super Nintendo Switch is not going to be rendering at 4K. However, it will output at 4K. What does that mean? Well, it's running an NVIDIA Tegra chipset with all likelihood, and what it's going to have built in, customized in some way, probably an enhanced version of what is called Dlss, which stands for Deep Learning Super Sampling. What this is, it is an AI version of upscaling. So you take perhaps an internal rendering image of 1080p, and you use AI, deep learning, machine learning, all the learnings of all the robots, and you upscale it to 4K, and the end result is damn near indistinguishable from truly rendering at 4K. If you put two images side by side, one was DLSS, one was actual real 4K, and you ask the average person to pick which one was which, they probably wouldn't be able to without pixel peeping and zooming way in there to get a look at the edges and is aliasing correctly and all these sorts of things. Now, Bloomberg does speculate here that because of things like increasing labor costs in China and the semiconductor shortage that is ongoing, this thing will not be coming in at the $299 price point that the original Switch landed at. It will likely be over that $300 mark, and then the Switch Lite will remain in place as the cheap model to fill that niche. Apparently, the current Nintendo Switch will just be kicked to the curb. It will be gone and no one will care anymore. Obviously, the Super Nintendo Switch will be fully backwards compatible with the current Nintendo Switch. This isn't a true next-gen Switch. It's more like the difference between the PS4 and the PS4 Pro. So it'll be something that hoping people will not just buy new, but will also feel the need to upgrade to. So we've got a Super Nintendo Switch coming with a bigger OLED screen, likely still running at 720p. We have internal hardware that will bring it in line with the newest, biggest, baddest, and most performant mobile chipsets, whereas the old Switch running that Tegra was really starting to show its age. And we have all this being announced within the next probably 2 weeks and becoming available to buy sometime before the holiday season with all likelihood. So guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments down below. Are you interested in upgrading to this Super Nintendo Switch? Perhaps you've been on the sidelines with the Switch and you're looking for an entry point. Well, perhaps playing something like Breath of the Wild, freshly patched to run in 4 freaking K with DLSS would be enough to pull you on over to the Nintendo side of the field. Let me know all that in the comments down below. Thanks for making it to the end of the video because it helps me out more than you could possibly know. Stay tuned for more coverage just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.